So Rob, for example, with the last presidential election, well, we won't talk about the city councils. That's a separate form of ranked choice voting. But if we had had ranked choice voting in the 2016 presidential election, how might things have played out differently, or how might people who voted for Jill Stein and people who voted for Hillary Clinton not hate each other as sworn enemies anymore?
Right. So, I mean, part of the tension of the current system is you only vote for one person.
The lesser of two evils. It's in the Constitution, isn't it?
Right. Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, which is, one very key point. Everything we're talking about today can be done without changing the Constitution. The Constitution, in fact, is very flexible about election methods. We have a lot of history of different ways of voting. In fact, we have a lot of different ways of voting right now. Mm-hmm. Like Louisiana, they don't vote before November. Everyone goes to November ballot and the top two face off in December. There's a whole range of things out there. And ranked choice voting is sort of part of that. We think is a very good way to vote. But right now, when you have two people running and you vote for one of them, you've cast a pretty expressive ballot. If there's three people running and you only vote for one of them, then you've left two things blank, right? You haven't indicated a preference between the other two. And then if you only add up, the votes and you stop there, the person who has the most votes might not have half the votes, mm-hmm. right? They might. And if they have more than half, they're a pretty legitimate winner. But if they have 40%, or in 2016, a number of states where one would say 45% or 47%, not a majority, what that means is that those voters who voted for the candidate who finished third or fourth, Gary Johnson, Jill Stein, those votes were expressive of what those voters wanted to say, but they didn't also get to indicate a preference between Trump and Clinton. And ranked choice voting essentially allows you to do that, right? So you say, well, my first choice is Gary Johnson, my first choice is Jill Stein, but I do actually have a preference between those other two, and here it is. And so then you would add up all the first choices, and if you end up with Wisconsin, where it's a 48% win state or something like that, then you would take out the folks who aren't in the top two, and those ballots would count for their next choice. And then you just get a head-to-head comparison. An instant runoff is what the system can be called. And I'll use a good example because it's on the ballot in Maine in two ways in June. It's going to be used in Maine for governor's races. And actually, Democrats may have as many as 10 candidates, and the voters will now be able to actually indicate preferences among them. And then Republicans, it looks like they'll have about 5, and then they can do that as well. And then they'll use this ranked choice
And any
system.
Independents?
Well, this is a primary, so this is only a primary, right?
Okay,
so it's just separate primaries, Republican primary, Democratic primary. This is only in June. But quite a significant use of it. But they'll also vote on whether to keep it, mm-hmm. and keep it for all future primaries and for the U.S. Senate and U.S. House races come November. And so then, like when Angus King is running as an independent in November, there can be a Democrat, there can be a Republican, there can be a Green, there can be a Libertarian. And then the winner, as you were pointing out about sort of the tenor of the campaign, has to learn to be appealing as a second and third choice, as well as most important to get that first choice, but you also have to learn how to speak to other people and not just engage in flaming other people.